Hello. Today we're going to talk about the rise of multi-threat ransomware. I'm Chris Boyd, lead Malware Intelligence Analyst with Malwarebytes, and we're going to look at a short potted history of some of the ways that ransomware has evolved down the years, some of the things it gets up to, and what you can do to protect yourself from these threats. Now, ransomware has evolved over the years. Originally, it was just a single threat. They would attack your computer or your organization, they would encrypt your files, and ask for a ransom to return those files to you unharmed. This tactic waned off over the years. It became less effective. People stopped paying the ransom. People started turning to law enforcement for assistance. So the ransomware authors came up with something called a double threat attack, which is where they do it the same as last time. They encrypt your files. They threaten not to give them back unless you pay the ransom. But on top of that, they will also do things like threaten to release your files to the public if you don't pay up. This tactic evolved again in the last couple of years to something called a triple threat attack, which is where they capture your files, they encrypt your files, they ask for a ransom, and they also continue to attack your network, your systems, if you don't pay up and if you ignore the threat of your data being leaked onto the web. So it's just this escalation, and it keeps going and going until they've knocked your website offline. They've knocked your systems offline. They have brought your organization to its knees unless you pay the price. One famous example of this is Black Cat ransomware from a couple of years ago, where they attacked the famous Bandai Namco game developer, international publisher of titles like Dark Souls, Ace Combat, and Soul Calibur. It doesn't matter how large your organization is, these groups will come after you, and they will strike gold more often than not. If we're talking about ransomware attacks affecting the public down the years, from 2017 to the present day, there are many, many examples of the impact of not just on the individual companies' networks, but also impacting the public at large. So in 2017, you had the famous WannaCry attack on the UK's National Health Service that brought many, many hospitals into all sorts of trouble. There were hospitals where they had to resort to using pen and paper to deal with patients because none of their systems worked. Of course, this is the infamous WannaCrypt ransom note. What happened to my computer? Can I recover my files? How do I pay? And if you don't pay, typically in Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency, you wouldn't get your files back. This was a terrible attack. In 2021, a Belgian law enforcement organization was compromised with Ragnar Locker, and they threatened to release the data that this law enforcement agency had collected. So it's not just impacting the law enforcement agency, it's anyone that's ended up on their files, anyone that's encountered this law enforcement agency down the line. Their data was also potentially at risk of being leaked on their so-called wall of shame. In 2022, you had a famous German newspaper printing press that was essentially frozen because they had to shut everything down, which meant that they couldn't pump out the newspapers on a daily basis anymore. Now all these things add up. It's one day everything's working fine, the next day your health service is broken, you can't get your favorite newspaper, your insurance company is locked down because they've been attacked by ransomware. It just goes and goes and goes. It's not just the business itself that's impacted, it's everything that business services is also affected. There are many, many attacks on schools and school districts. Last year, the US's LA Unified School District data was leaked by a famous ransomware group, and they are targeting many schools, many educational authorities. They don't care. They will target these organizations and take them down. And it doesn't matter if it's an educational authority, it doesn't matter if it's a children's charity. Most of these groups are quite happy to impact these services to get what they want, which is typically a cryptocurrency ransom. Just this year, you had housing authorities in the city of LA impacted by ransomware, and they have to shut down parts of their business, stop operating to the full efficiency. And this has a major impact on people's lives. You think about all the people that may need to use the housing authority, make use of their services, suddenly told that they can't have crucial, important aspects of their day-to-day life dealt with because they've been shut down with ransomware. It's frankly incredible. But these are the kinds of impacts that these attacks can have. So, what are the solutions to these problems? What can you actually do about the ransomware threat? Well, there's a couple of different things you can do to varying degrees of success. Cyber insurance has been a big deal over the last couple of years, and this is where you pay an insurance premium to be reimbursed in case of an attack. But this doesn't always work. It's no magic bullet solution. Many of these claims, when companies come to make their cyber insurance claim, are actually turned down. This happened recently, where the Supreme Court of Ohio issued the ruling just days before New Year, that a software and service provider shouldn't be covered by an insurance premium against a ransomware attack, as it didn't cause direct or physical harm to tangible components of software, as it doesn't have any. So again, there's no guarantee. Your organization can pay big money to get this cyber insurance cover, and it might not actually pay out in the end. So it's a big risk, whatever you do. But some of the ways you can, protect and defend your own actual network outside of cyber insurance, where you can try and secure RDP, remote desktop protocol. Many organizations are wide open with where this is concerned. They don't lock it down. There's no passwords. Login attempts aren't rate limited. It's a mess. You can password protect your RDP. You can place the RDP behind a VPN. You also need to make sure, if you do this, that you secure your VPN, because that is your single point of access at this point for your RDP protocol. You can use multi-factor authentication. So, you can use an app on your phone. You can use a hardware key that plugs into your computer directly and is very, very resilient against attacks like phishing, for example. And as mentioned, you can limit your login attempts. If you're using Windows 11, that limits the number of times you can try and log in via RDP by default. If you're not on Windows 11, you probably have to set this up manually. So that's worth keeping in mind. Other ways you can protect yourself: you can encrypt your backups. I mean, in the first place, you have to make sure you make backups. That's absolutely crucial. But you should be storing your backups off-site, away from the main network. If you keep your backups on the network, when the ransomware authors come to town, they will simply encrypt your backups in a way that means all your hardware backing these documents up is wasted. But you should encrypt the backups yourself to ensure that if someone accesses them off-site, for example, they can't just take all the files and access them directly. They would have to put some actual work in to try and compromise your data after they've stolen it. You need a response plan. It's not enough to find yourself compromised and then wonder what to do next. You need to have something in place, set in stone. Who are the people to contact when something happens? If they're not available, who do you go to? What's the response plan with regards to contacting law enforcement, or train people who can come in and analyze your network and make sure that it's clean and assist with the cleanup afterwards? Of course, you have to have this done, or you're going to be lost at sea when the ransomware comes calling. And of course, you can protect yourself with a variety of security tools to lock down your network, lock down your desktops, make sure your endpoints are secure, because it's essential that you've got the resources in place to protect and respond to an incident like this. Your tools need to be quick. They need to be speedy. You don't want lots of system slowdown in the middle of an emergency. These tools need to do what you expect them to do when you expect them to do it. There can be no room for error, or your tools doing random things when you least expect it. Everything needs to work very, very efficiently. They need to have a very low impact on the systems. You don't want a huge footprint on your systems, hogging resources, slowing things down. File recovery: if your security tools allow you to try and recover some of the files when encryption starts taking place from a ransomware attack, if they can lock down and isolate important files from your network to try and stop them being compromised as well, this is a plus. As is, blocking common entry points for ransomware in the first place, which loops us neatly back around to things like RDP, insecure RDP, insecure VPNs, lack of two-factor authentication for files, services, resources on your network. These are all ways that you can try and reduce or eliminate the threat of ransomware on your network. Thank you for listening.